Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Alma Ilara Mountain, and the year everything split in two, before and after I was 13. If you asked me to circle the exact second my family decided I was an extra in my own life, it wouldn't be a slow realization. It would be a sticky note on the fridge. Stay at a friend's house, back in a week. Love you. No name, no plan. Just my mother's looping cursive like a shrug. They left for Florida the morning of my birthday. My older sister, Jasmine Mountain, posted a photo with a pink suitcase and a caption about family time, and my younger sister, Lily Mountain, added a string of palm tree emojis. I sat on the porch with my backpack in my lap because I thought maybe the note was step 1 and step 2 was someone pulling up to get me. An aunt, a neighbor, a miracle. No one came. The street lights blinked awake. A dog barked at me as if I was trespassing on my own steps. I microwaved a burrito I didn't really want and ate it at the counter, pretending the hum of the appliance was conversation. By day 2, I started telling myself it was a mix-up. By day 4, a thought I hated crept in. Maybe it wasn't a mix-up at all. Being the middle girl had always felt like being the buffer between a showstopper and an encore. Jasmine had the framed certificates and the varsity letters. Lily had recitals, braces, and themed parties with balloons that matched the cupcakes. I had responsible, which is adult code for invisible. But leaving me behind on purpose was a new genre of silence. On day 6, I left the library with a shingled stack of books like armor. The afternoon heat had the kind of glare that makes you squint at your own shadow. That's when a sleek black car rolled slow beside the curb, window gliding down like a scene that doesn't belong to your life. Alma? The voice was surprised and familiar. Uncle Richard, the wealthy one who'd stopped showing up to holidays sometime before I learned long division. According to my mother, he was too arrogant for family gatherings, which I now know translates to, he had boundaries. He took in the backpack, the sweat-plastered hair, the guarded smile I wore like a mouth guard. Why are you walking home alone? Where are your parents? Florida, I said. It felt ridiculous in the air. Florida, like saying, they went to Mars. And you're here, apparently. He muttered something under his breath that I'm pretty sure wasn't a compliment, then said, "Get in, you're not walking." My brain whispered all the school assembly rules about strangers. My stomach, which had done 3 nights of ramen and 1 of cereal dust, countered with a louder rule. Hungry is a kind of emergency, too. The car smelled like leather and something clean, not citrus, not cologne, just the idea of new. He took me to a diner with cracked vinyl booths and pie under glass. When the burger and shake landed, I looked at them like they might evaporate if I blinked. He didn't rush me. He watched me eat, then asked questions no one had asked me in months. About school, friends, what I liked. I said, history, but mostly the parts people get wrong. He smiled a little, like he'd learned something about me that mattered. When he drove me back to my block, he didn't park. He idled at the curb and said, "Pack a bag." I stared at him. What? You're not sleeping on a couch in an empty house while your parents price sun hats. Pack a bag, Alma. There are moments that feel like the world has hinges you didn't know about. The door swung. His house was a different planet. The guest room bed felt generous, like it expected me to be comfortable. I perched on the edge because I was afraid to make a crease. He leaned on the doorframe and quirked an eyebrow. Planning to sleep sitting up like a statue? "I don't want to mess up your sheets," I whispered. "They wash." His mouth did a half smile that wasn't unkind. Things are meant to be used, not feared. In the morning, he poured orange juice into an actual glass. At home, we drank out of fading carnival cups that smelled faintly of plastic and last summer. I held the glass careful as a test. He said, "It's juice, not a contract. Drink." At school, when a teacher asked who would be my guardian for the meeting that week, he didn't hesitate. "I am." The calm way he said it made my ribs loosen like someone had quietly opened a window. I didn't know how to receive kindness. When he bought me 2 pairs of jeans and a sweater, I tucked the tags into a drawer because I assumed he'd want to return them later. When he gave me cash for lunch, I hoarded it and ate crackers because money felt like a museum exhibit I wasn't supposed to touch. It took exactly 12 days for him to catch me in the kitchen at midnight, eating dry cereal from the box. "Why?" he said from the doorway. "Are you auditioning for the role of raccoon?" "I don't want to take too much." He opened the fridge, scooped leftover pasta into a bowl, microwaved it, and slid it over. "New rule. If it's in this house, it belongs to the people in this house. That includes you. I nodded and tried not to cry into the spaghetti. Tears felt like a luxury. I didn't want to owe him more. I waited for my parents to storm up his walk, to bang on the door, to demand I come home like overdue library property. Days turned into weeks. No knock, no call. Jasmine posted beach photos with captions about sisters forever, and Lily cradled shells like treasure. My name did not appear under any of it. Uncle Richard took me to a school meeting and sat through the awkward folding chair lecture where the counselor used phrases like quiet potential and underengaged. He didn't argue. He wrote down dates and then bought me a desk so homework didn't live on the floor. He scheduled an eye exam I didn't realize I needed. He made appointments: dentist, doctor, hair. Not once did he say, "You owe me." He called it maintenance, like I was a person worth maintaining. I was still 13, so I tested the edges. One Saturday, I stayed too late at a friend's and didn't text because I didn't know the rules. When I crept back in at midnight, braced for the kind of anger I recognized, he handed me a sandwich. "Glad you're alive," he said. "Text next time. Otherwise, I'll assume you're in a ditch and buy a shovel." His calm was scarier than yelling. It sounded like care with boundaries. It wasn't all lectures and errands. Sometimes he'd drag me along to his office and tell me to watch how people talk to each other. "Half of success is tone and grip," he murmured once while shaking a man's hand. "The rest is showing up when everyone else is inventing excuses." He said it like a joke. It felt like a blueprint. The first holiday in his house, I expected a polite gift card and a corner seat. Instead, he handed me a leather journal with my initials stamped in tiny gold letters. "Write down what you notice," he said. "Even the dumb stuff, especially the dumb stuff." I ran my fingers over the grain like it might bite. I said thank you, but the words were clumsy in my mouth. I wasn't used to owning anything that wouldn't be taken back. That night, my phone buzzed with a group photo. My parents, Jasmine and Lily, in matching pajamas before a tree that looked rented, captioned, "Mountain Traditions. No tag, no text, no, we miss you." I stared at the picture until my vision blurred. Then I looked down at the journal in my lap and opened to the first page. I wrote, "Things in this house are meant to be used, not feared." I wrote, "If it's in this house, it belongs to the people in this house." I wrote, "I am in this house." The words looked too bold, like I'd stolen them. But when I closed the cover and traced my initials again, I felt something unfamiliar stirring under my ribs. Not safety, not yet, but the outline of it, sketched in pencil. I didn't know it then, but that diner booth and this journal were the hinges the whole door would swing on. Years from now, in a room that smelled like leather and law, those pages would become a spine I could stand on while other people scrambled for the script. But for now, I was just 13, tucked into clean sheets that didn't hiss when I moved, learning the first impossible lesson. I wasn't disposable. I had been misfiled. And someone had finally pulled the tab with my name on it and put me in the right place. By the time I turned 14, Uncle Richard had decided two things about me. First, I had terrible posture. Second, I had potential, buried somewhere under that slouch. He'd tap my shoulders whenever I hunched over homework. "Stand up straight, Alma. You're not a question mark. People believe you more when you look like you believe yourself." It sounded silly at first, but after a while, I started catching myself mid-hunch, pulling my spine straight, pretending confidence until it didn't feel like pretending. At school, the change didn't go unnoticed. Teachers began calling on me more. I started raising my hand, even joined debate club after Uncle Richard bribed me with pizza. At my first debate meet, my voice cracked like a dying microphone, but I still won the argument about whether cats were superior pets. When the judge announced it, I caught Uncle Richard's grin in the back row, the kind that said, "See, I told you so." At home, he wasn't just a guardian. He was a quiet storm of lessons, disguised as everyday life. He never gave long speeches about ambition or gratitude. He just lived them. When I asked for a new phone, he said, "Cool, how much do you have saved?" I blinked. None? Then you'll enjoy this one twice as much when you earn it." So I got my first part-time job bagging groceries. My first paycheck was $73.16. I waved it at him like I'd just won a marathon. He didn't take it. He took me to the bank. "Rule of 2, he said. "Save half, spend half, so you can enjoy today without bankrupting tomorrow." I rolled my eyes, but years later, that one rule would become the spine of my independence. Holidays used to be something I dreaded, long tables filled with performances I didn't audition for. At Uncle Richard's house, Christmas felt quieter but full in a different way. He gave thoughtful gifts instead of expensive ones, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, a fountain pen with real weight, a scarf he said matched my serious debate club expression. Meanwhile, my phone would light up with group photos from the mountains. My parents, Jasmine and Lily, all posing by palm trees or dinner tables that looked like magazine spreads. No message ever said, "Wish you were here." The ache was real, but it wasn't the same kind of ache as before. It didn't hollow me out anymore. It reminded me that I was finally learning what family could look like when it wasn't a performance. One Christmas, Richard handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a keychain, silver, engraved with Mountain and Carlton, a work in progress. I frowned. A work in progress? He grinned. Because that's what we both are. You're learning to build. I'm learning not to do it alone. I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged him. It was awkward, like two people remembering how to do something they'd forgotten as kids. But he didn't pull away. That night, I wrote in my journal, "You don't have to share blood to share a home." By 16, Uncle Richard started taking me along to his office during summer breaks. I was nervous, surrounded by suits, polished desks, and people who moved like they knew the world owed them attention. He nudged me forward during introductions. "Relax," he whispered. They put their pants on one leg at a time. Some of them even fall over doing it. I laughed out loud, and suddenly the tension broke. That became our running joke whenever I felt small. One leg at a time, kid. He taught me things no class ever covered. How to listen before speaking, how to read people's real motives, how to shake hands with conviction. He told me half the world bluffs, the other half apologizes for breathing. Learn to do neither. That was the first time I started believing I might actually be capable of building a life beyond surviving it. When I turned 17, the differences between my family and the family I came from became impossible to ignore. Jasmine sent out college acceptance posts and tagged everyone but me. Lily bragged about her new car on Instagram, writing, "Thanks, Mom and Dad," under a photo of herself leaning against the hood. I stared at the picture one night while Uncle Richard made tea, and I whispered, "They never even check in, you know? Not a text, not a happy birthday." He didn't look up from his cup. "And how much longer do you plan to wait for them to?" That question landed like thunder in a still room. I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. From then on, I stopped waiting for the mountains to remember me. Instead, I started remembering myself. Senior year, Uncle Richard surprised me with a small box before prom. Inside was a delicate bracelet, silver, with a tiny engraved A. He said, "Don't look for validation, Alma. Look for peace. Validation is rented. Peace you own." I didn't realize it then, but that was foreshadowing for everything that would come later. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the confrontation that would test everything he'd taught me. But for now, in that moment, I smiled, fastened the bracelet, and told him, "You sound like a fortune cookie." He chuckled. "Then make sure you crack it open before it's too late." That night, under string lights and cheap DJ music, I caught myself laughing freely for the first time in years. No invisible leash tugging at my worth. No sticky note saying, "Back in a week." Just me, Alma Mountain, a work in progress, finally learning to be seen. College wasn't supposed to happen for me, at least not in the version of my life my parents had mapped out. Jasmine was the scholarship star, Lily was the golden dancer, and me? I was the kid who should probably look into community classes, the family code for don't expect much. If it weren't for Uncle Richard, I would have believed that. He didn't just hand me tuition money, he made me earn every inch of it. We sat at his kitchen table for hours, going over spreadsheets, grants, and financial aid forms until I thought I'd go blind from fine print. Scholarships first, grants second. My help fills the cracks, not the foundation, he said. So I hunted for scholarships like oxygen. There was one for left-handed students, so I learned to write lefty in 2 weeks. Another for descendants of beekeepers. I wrote a dramatic essay about the harmony between human and hive, even though my only experience with bees involved running away from one at age 8. Piece by piece, I built a patchwork of opportunity. When the acceptance letter from Western Summit University arrived, Uncle Richard looked at it like it was a contract he'd negotiated himself. "Congratulations," he said, eyes bright. "Now go prove them right." Move-in day was a circus of parents, balloons, and emotional breakdowns. Except mine didn't show. Not even a text. Not even a good luck. Uncle Richard carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs in August heat, sweating through his button-down, but refusing to let me lift the heavy ones. He joked, "This counts as my workout for the year. Don't tell my trainer I actually did something." When we finished setting up, I looked around the tiny dorm room. Mismatched sheets, thrifted lamp, faint smell of bleach, and felt something sharp twist in my chest. He must have seen it because he said quietly, "Don't look for them here, Alma. Look ahead. That's where you're going." I nodded, too full of emotion to speak. Before leaving, he handed me a small envelope. Inside was a note written in his careful block letters. "If you ever doubt you belong, check your own reflection. You got here without them." I kept that note taped inside my planner for all 4 years. The first months were hard. I felt like an imposter in every room. The girl with thrift store shoes and a duffel bag that smelled faintly of detergent instead of designer perfume. But Uncle Richard called every Sunday, no matter what, sometimes just to tease me. "So, Miss Dean's list, still surviving on ramen and ambition?" "Barely," I'd joke. "Good. Struggle keeps you interesting." I found comfort in the rhythm of those calls. They were my anchor. Sophomore year, I met Ethan Cole, the kind of guy who made everyone laugh effortlessly, like the air around him was lighter. We met at a student volunteer event. He was helping build a community garden, and I was pretending I knew how to use a shovel. He offered to show me the right grip. I rolled my eyes, but let him. We started dating a few months later. Slow, cautious, but real. Ethan wasn't flashy. He didn't rescue me. He respected me. That mattered more than I realized. One night, while we studied for finals, he asked, "Why do you always double-check everything, even the smallest things?" I hesitated, because for a long time, I was the mistake people forgot to correct. He didn't say anything grand. He just reached over, took my hand, and said, "Then let's make sure no one forgets you again." That's when I knew he saw me. Not as the invisible middle child, but as a person who'd fought her way into her own light. Junior year brought a familiar ghost, Sabrina, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. The type who could turn an apology into a performance. She reappeared at campus events, complimenting my outfit while scanning the room for validation. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, but one evening, she accidentally mentioned that Ethan had helped her with a project over coffee. When I asked him about it later, he was honest. She reached out, said she needed help with her business plan. I didn't think it mattered. It shouldn't have mattered, but the memory of being replaced, overlooked, erased, it all came flooding back. That night, Uncle Richard's voice echoed in my head. "Half the world bluffs, the other half apologizes for breathing. Learn to do neither." So I didn't accuse, I didn't beg, I just said, "Next time, let her find someone else's kindness to borrow." Ethan nodded, no argument, and that was how I knew he was worth trusting. By senior year, life started aligning in ways that felt almost unreal. I earned my degree in civil engineering, the same field Uncle Richard had once called the art of building things that last. He came to graduation, front row, clapping so loudly the dean actually paused mid-speech. Afterward, he handed me a pen, not a fancy one, just a sturdy silver pen. "Use it to sign the contracts you'll be proud of," he said. I smiled. "Not my autograph?" He grinned. "One day, but for now, build first, brag later." That night, while my classmates partied, I sat in my dorm room, rereading the notes in my old journal. The one he gave me when I was 13. The pages were full. Lessons. Tiny victories. Scribbled gratitude. Line stood out. "If it's in this house, it belongs to the people in this house." That house wasn't brick and wood anymore. It was the life I was building, one I finally belonged in. After graduation, I landed a job at a small engineering firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Ethan moved to the same city for work, and for the first time, I felt like my life was moving on my own terms. Uncle Richard and I would meet every Friday for dinner. He'd raise his glass of whiskey and tease, "Look at you, Miss Mountain, climbing the career ladder without tripping." I'd laugh. "Give it time. I'm still clumsy." What I didn't notice, what I refused to notice, were the small changes in him. The tiredness in his voice, the way he rubbed his shoulder after carrying groceries, or how sometimes he'd forget the name of a restaurant we'd been to a dozen times. At the time, I told myself he was just getting older. I didn't know it was the quiet prelude to everything that was about to shatter. Because the strongest people in your life never fall apart all at once. They fade first, softly, almost politely, until the day you realize you've been holding up the world they used to carry. It started small, the kind of changes you tell yourself not to overthink. Uncle Richard canceled a few of our Friday dinners, said work had been murderous lately. He'd never used that excuse before. Then, one evening, when I dropped by unannounced, I found him asleep in his armchair at 8 p.m. The TV flickered, whispering an infomercial to an audience of one. When I gently touched his shoulder, he jolted awake, smiling too fast. "Long day," he said, voice thin. Guess I blinked too long. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. Over the next few weeks, the hints multiplied. Bottles of pills on the counter, the way his hand shook slightly when pouring coffee, how he'd forget he'd already told a story twice. I noticed. He noticed me noticing, and we made an unspoken pact of denial. He still checked on me, always in that calm, steady way that had built me back from scratch. "You're doing well at work," he said one evening after I vented about an impossible client. "Just remember, jobs will replace you in a week. People won't, if you pick the right ones." That line hit harder than any quarterly review. I didn't realize then that he was preparing me for a future where he wouldn't be there. Months passed. My career grew. My confidence solidified. Ethan and I found an easy rhythm. Him with his marketing firm, me at the engineering office. For the first time, I felt steady. But every time Uncle Richard brushed off a cough or waved away my concern, the steadiness cracked a little. Then it happened. A Tuesday afternoon, a phone call, a voice trembling. "Ms. Mountain, this is Grace from Mr. Carlton's office. He collapsed during a meeting. They've taken him to St. Luke's Hospital." I barely remember the drive there, just the red lights bleeding into each other and my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my palms. When I walked into the hospital room, he looked impossibly small against the white sheets. Still, when he saw me, he smirked weakly. "Don't look so serious." I told them I wanted a free night's stay. 5-star service, if you ignore the food. I tried to smile, but my throat burned. "You scared me." He shrugged. "First time for everything." Then softer, "Sit, kid." He waited until the room quieted, until it was just the hum of monitors and the muffled hallway outside. "You know," he said, voice rougher than usual, "I always figured your dad would be the one teaching you all this stuff. How to stand tall, handle money, argue without shouting. But I'm glad it was me." "Don't talk like that," I whispered. "Like what?" "Like you're—" I couldn't finish. He gave me that crooked smile again. "Honest?" He reached for my hand, something he rarely did. "You've outpaced every expectation anyone ever had for you, Alma. I just want you to remember one thing." "What?" "You're not the spare. You never were." I blinked fast, refusing to let tears win. He must have noticed because he added, "If you ruin these sheets with tears, I'm sending you the dry cleaning bill." I laughed, the kind that breaks midair, and for a second it felt normal again. He stayed a few nights, then came home. Slower, quieter, but still trying to act invincible. Neither of us talked about the scare again, but we both knew something had shifted. The last Christmas we spent together, he handed me a small box wrapped in gold paper. Inside was the leather journal, the same one he'd given me when I was 13, except now it wasn't empty. Every page was filled. Notes, advice, sarcastic commentary, doodles, even taped in receipts from our dinners with scribbled captions like, "Best burger of 2014, still not worth the calories." The final page stopped me cold. His handwriting was shaky, but clear. "If they ever try to erase you again, remember this. You've already written your own chapter." I looked up, my throat tight. "You've been writing in this all these years?" He shrugged. "Couldn't have you keeping all the good lines for yourself." I hugged him then. A real hug, no hesitation. And even though he laughed and muttered, "Easy, you'll crack a rib," I didn't let go right away. Something deep down knew it was the last time I'd hear that laugh in person. When the call came a few months later, I didn't answer at first. It was just before dawn. My phone buzzed once, then again. I picked up on the third ring. "Ms. Mountain," said Grace, voice breaking. I'm so sorry. Richard passed away in his sleep early this morning." The world went silent, like someone had turned the volume of life all the way down. I sat there on the edge of my bed, phone still in my hand, staring at the wall as if I could will it to make sense. He was supposed to be fine. He was supposed to make sarcastic comments about old age and cholesterol. He wasn't supposed to go. The next few days blurred together. Funeral arrangements, paperwork, calls. He'd made me his executor, of course, because of course he had. There was no one else who knew what songs he hated, which tie was his serious one, or that he preferred plain white roses to lilies. The service was small, dignified. Colleagues, old friends, and a handful of people who truly cared. I stood beside his portrait, accepting handshakes and condolences that barely registered. And then, like ghosts from a past life, they arrived. My parents, Jasmine, Lily. They swept into the chapel like they were attending a gala. My mother wore black designer sunglasses big enough to hide a dozen sins. My father shook hands with people he didn't know, murmuring about what a loss to the family. They hadn't spoken to him in over 15 years. When they spotted me, their eyes widened. Shock, guilt, calculation, all tangled together. "Alma," my mother gasped, grabbing my hand. "We had no idea you were this close to Richard." I pulled back, steady. "You didn't ask." My father cleared his throat, adopting the tone he reserved for sermons and sales pitches. "Your uncle was truly a remarkable man. Generous, successful, always part of the family." That word, family, almost made me laugh. Jasmine joined in, voice sweet but sharp. "So, any idea when the will reading is? I mean, Uncle Richard was, well, comfortable." Lily sighed dramatically, adjusting her pearl earrings. "I just hope he wanted us to keep the family legacy intact. The house, the cars, that kind of thing. That." For a second, I thought I might be hallucinating. My uncle's body wasn't even in the ground yet, and they were circling like vultures. I didn't answer. I just walked away. Over the next week, the messages started flooding in. Texts, voicemails, social media requests. My mother's voice, suddenly syrup sweet. "Honey, we really should reconnect. Family is all we have." Jasmine's DM. "We should talk about estate stuff soon." Lily's emoji text. Like grief was a fashion statement. Meanwhile, Uncle Richard's lawyer, Mr. Halpern, called. "The will reading will be Monday morning. It might be eventful," he warned. "Your uncle was very clear about his wishes." I smiled faintly, fingertips brushing the edge of the journal. "If they ever try to erase you again." They were about to learn what happens when you mistake absence for weakness. And I was about to keep my promise, to myself and to the man who'd taught me how to stand tall. The lawyer's office smelled like leather, old money, and a little bit of karma. Thick drapes, heavy chairs that forced you to sit up straight, the kind of quiet that made every breath sound like a confession. Mr. Halpern, the estate lawyer, sat at the head of a long mahogany table. To his right, my family. My parents, Jasmine and Lily, dressed in expensive grief. My mother clutched tissues like props. My father folded his hands with performative solemnity. Jasmine's phone screen kept lighting up under the table, and Lily kept whispering, "Do you think he mentioned the house?" I sat across from them, journal in my lap, pulse steady. I'd chosen a simple black dress, no frills, no armor. I didn't need one. Halpern cleared his throat. "We're here to read the last will and testament of Richard Carleton." He adjusted his glasses, tone measured. He began with the formalities. Debts settled, small donations to charity, gifts to longtime employees. My family shifted in their seats, pretending patience but reeking of anticipation. Finally, Halpern turned a page. "Now, regarding the distribution of Mr. Carleton's estate." Jasmine leaned forward, her earrings catching the light. Lily clasped her hands together like she was about to receive a blessing. My father gave me a sideways look, half pity, half triumph, as if to say, "Don't get your hopes up, Alma." Halpern read slowly, clearly, as though savoring every word. "To my estranged relatives who only remembered my existence in the shadow of my bank account, I leave nothing." The silence cracked like thunder. My mother gasped. Jasmine's jaw literally dropped. Lily blinked, whispering, "He's joking, right?" Halpern didn't even flinch. He turned another page. "To my niece, Alma Mountain, who was left behind at 13 but never left my side since. I leave the entirety of my estate, including all assets, properties, accounts, and holdings." For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then, all at once, 4 pairs of eyes snapped toward me. It was Jasmine who spoke first, voice high and cracking. "That's impossible. He barely even knew her." I kept my voice calm, even. "He knew me for 15 years. You just stopped noticing." My father's face flushed red. "You manipulated him. You poisoned him against his own family." I placed my hand over the journal, fingers tracing the soft leather cover. "No, you did that yourselves. The day you left me with a note on the fridge." Lily tried a softer tone, the one she used when she wanted something. "Come on, Alma. You can't honestly plan to keep all of it. We're family. That word again. I smiled, not cruel, not triumphant, just tired. Funny. 15 years of silence didn't sound much like family. But sure, now that there's money on the table, we're suddenly related again. Mr. Halpern shut the folder with a deliberate snap. The will is airtight. Mr. Carlton was meticulous. Any contest will be dismissed. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. The look on their faces, disbelief curdling into anger, was the same look they'd worn when they realized they couldn't control me anymore. I stood smoothing the front of my dress. If you'll excuse me, I have things to arrange. Mr. Halpern, thank you for your time. Jasmine hissed, "This isn't over." I turned to her, meeting her eyes squarely. "It was over when you stopped calling me your sister." Then I walked out. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner, like the world had been holding its breath for me and finally exhaled. The sun reflected off the building's glass facade, blinding for a second, and in that flash I saw myself. Not the scared kid with a backpack waiting for a ride that never came, but a woman standing on her own 2 feet, exactly where she chose to be. I took out my phone, scrolled to my messages, and opened the one person I still wished I could text. I typed, "Wish you were here to see their faces, old man." Then, after a pause, I added, "You were right, I wrote my own chapter." I hit send, to nowhere, to everywhere. Later that week, I stood on the balcony of Richard's house, my house now. The city lights below looked like the pulse of everything he'd built, everything he'd passed on to me. I held the journal in my hands and flipped to the last page again. The ink was faint now, but the words still burned. "If they ever try to erase you again, remember this. You've already written your own chapter." I smiled. "I did," I whispered, "and I'll keep writing." In that moment, I wasn't thinking about inheritance or property. I was thinking about the girl I used to be, sitting on a porch with a sticky note on a fridge and a heart full of questions. If I could speak to her now, I'd tell her, one day you'll have a home where you're not a guest, a life that doesn't apologize for existing, and a name no one forgets. Ethan met me at the balcony door, sliding an arm around my shoulders. "You okay?" I nodded, leaning into him. "Yeah, just full circle." He glanced at the city. He'd be proud, you know. I looked up at the sky, wide and silver blue. I think he already is. Below us, the lights of the city flickered like pages turning, and for the first time in my life, the story was entirely, unmistakably mine.